Okay, so let's talk about order. The book begins with Leadbelly's voice and then 6 other voices. And it ends with 6 other voices and then Leadbelly's voice. I'm sure there are more things that we can get into about order with this. But that's what I see. Oh, top. That's called chiasmus. Chiasmus is spelled Chiasmus. Chiasmus means you've repeated something in reverse. So it's eat to live, don't live to eat. That's an exact reversal. It's if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. Like those are examples of chiasmus. And so we see this happening in the larger structure of the book, because I think the book is also a form, or he's trying to get to the point where he's working through some ideas. And as I pointed out in some of the in another video, the prose poems are in pretty much the first half of the book. The contrapuntals are limited to one section. The sonnets are limited to one section. And we know he's doing something with ordering there. This book is based on a narrative order. You do have that narrative order. You do have some lyrical connections, but the lyrical connections do not mean that poems are right next to each other. The poems that are near each other because of where they occur in the narrative. I wouldn't count this as a chronologically ordered text, because the chronology, normally that's based on when the poem was written or when the poem was published. And this is based on the narrative, when things actually happened in Leadbelly's life. So I would call this a narrative structure. I would say that it has elements of lyricism or lyrical structure, but I think the dominating order comes from narrative. And I'm also interested in how not only like the order of the poems being determined by narrative, but the order of the poems being determined by the form that the poem is written in, or the speaker who speaks the poem. So Martha is only going to speak in certain sections. She can't really talk about what it's like to be at Angola or at Sugarland. Era is only going to have that one section where she's like, I love that poem. Let me just look at it, son. So I don't make up my own words. Era, she was like, I got no regrets for smashing Stella. I beat her broke again, ripped the cords out her throat, stomped her gut till it splintered, and I could just see her like, and I beat her, this hand right here, this hand is going crazy. But again, the point of me bringing up Era is that she only has one place in this narrative. She can only appear in that place. But he is playing with order, he is playing with structure. The order in which the characters appear. So we have Leadbelly, then mother, then father. Then we get inanimate objects. We get the gun. We get the street. We get the guitar. They all have a voice in what's going on. And then we get Blind Lemon. Blind Lemon is the only other person in that first portion. I'm talking about the What Kind of Soul Has Man. That first full section. He's the only human other than mother and father who get to speak there. So he is positioned as influential as the mother and father for Leadbelly. And if you don't know anything about the story, you can tell that from the form, right? From the order, I'm sorry. You can tell that from the order. Then you get a section where only Leadbelly is speaking from his perspective. He speaks about the gun. He speaks about Blind Lemon as his mentor. He, except for the last poem is Lethe, who gets to speak from her perspective. She's the only person who gets to speak other than Leadbelly in that what you gonna do when the world's on fire section. One thing I want to point out is that the poem Misfire is, if we're talking about the structure of the entire book, That poem, Miss Fire, comes fairly early. We're 14-ish pages in, and it is the inciting incident where he wrestles the guy who tries to touch Stella and beats him up. He shoots the gun doesn't go off, beats him up with the gun, and that is the inciting incident that changes the course of his life. Then he's now a person in convict labor, a person in and out of convict labor, so more vulnerable than he would have been otherwise. So that poem is pivotal and pivotally placed. It's right after What Blind Lemon Taught Me, and then of course right before the Harris County chain gang. So we can see an order of operation there. Then we have this moment, I would like to call this a peripetia. Peripetia is something that you see in Greek tragedies. And as I was reading this for the millionth time to prepare for this video, this term that I learned in undergrad popped into my head like, this is a reversal of fortune. This is a peripetia. So my professor would be proud. But if we look at page 57, July 1933, Leadbelly receives Lomax at Angola prison. I want to call this a peripetia, but I want to say that because it is a reversal of fortune, it is a moment when Leadbelly's life changes, where he is now released from prison, and he is on the road playing his music and getting paid for it, though not very much. And he is still under the power of a white man. But this is a moment when, when he's released from prison, he doesn't go back, according to this narrative. So that's why I want to call it a peripetia. Though it's not a full reversal of fortune. And we know this because the story keeps going. The peripetia is usually near the end of the story, and it's like, then you get the denouement right after it. It's like, oh, and they lived happily ever after, or they all died. Whatever happens in the story, the peripetia usually comes around the time of the climax. It doesn't here. And so this is why I'm really interested in this poem as a peripetia, P-E-R-I-T-P-E-T-E-I-A is how you spell it, peripetia. I'm interested in it because if you look at the poem, you have all these signs of transition there. You have introducing a new character, John Lomax. You have the poem recalling previous places and characters. So it literally goes through and lists like, I know of Cato, Fannin Street, the 32 Colt gun, and Black women's hands. So the women he's loved and who have loved him, including his mother, and hurled it into a song. He mentions Blind Lemon, that the double dropped D, the key that Lemon always said unlocked the grave's trapdoor. Come on, Jess. And drags the devil up from his harem to shiver between the strings. And you have, I crammed all 7 stolen years of clear-cut timber in my right hand, swing down on the strings with enough weight. So he's pulling from the 7 stolen years as well. And then in the fourth stanza, he says, one day I ran to tell my father of the minstrel toy I craved. The crazed full moon of eyes shone over a crescent of watermelon grin, and all it took was a twist in his back to set arms and legs in motion. Grinding out a tune from the tiny tin banjo in his lap, father searched my face for something he had not known as lost until then, took me out back to our field and pulled up a palm full of earth. You won't be nobody's slave long as you have this. All the time our world sifting slow between his fingers. So not only is the sign of transitions of a new character, recalling all the old character, all the old places, the years he's lost, but then you also get a flashback of the father, another sign of transition, and a meaningful quote that we haven't heard, that you won't be nobody's slave. So that's kind of signifying it's, what is that called when you signal? Foreshadowing. Is foreshadowing what's to come. that music will be the thing that frees him, you know, in scare quotes, because is he actually free? But you get all of that here. This poem is a poem for me of transition, and that's why I'm interested in it as a peripeteia, because it's almost fooling you. At this moment in a regular story, it would be like, yeah, Lomax found me. I started playing music. I had all these gold hits. Life was good. I didn't do all the drugs that were offered to me, and I could live a happy life. The end. Instead, we're just halfway through the book. So I do want to talk about, as we're talking about the order of things, I want to check in with this poem on page 87, which I think puts us near a place of a real peripeteia, of a real reversal of fortune. And I say real reversal, and it's a question mark. I'll tell you why in a second. So on page 87, we have an agnoresis, which is Anagnoris, right? Another Greek term. And normally the agnoresis is right before the peripeteia. The agnoresis is when the hero has a discovery, a recognition, a moment of insight. It could be a moment of insight about another character that completely changes their relationship, or a moment of insight about himself that completely changes the way he walks in the world. So it's a change from ignorance to knowledge, which fundamentally changes the way the character operates. And so, okay, an example of this would be in The Sixth Sense, when the guy, I don't know actors' names, the adult realizes that, he helped the little kid who sees dead people, but he himself is dead. That is a moment of insight about himself. That's this moment of insight that we're talking about. Another moment of insight would be, Luke, I am your father. What? Crazy. So here we have this poem, Lead Belly Writes Home, 1934. And he says outright. So we've had conflict, we've had conflict earlier in this section. Yeah, we've had conflict earlier. And this is the third poem of this section. I'm sorry, this is not the third poem. This is probably the fifth poem, fourth, 1, 2, it doesn't matter. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth poem. And he says, Martha. I mean, look at the format of that epistolary poem. It is not like the other ones where it's like, dear grandma, dear so-and-so. It's like Martha, big space. Lomax is a carpetbagger. End stop to that line. To the core, period, end stop. Truth slides itself, slicked up and sideways out his mouth, dressed up in the way he wants to see the world. So I let him brag on how he freed me, 'cause the fastest way to a white man's heart is through his lies. The fastest way out of his grace is truth. For me, this feels like a moment of insight about another character, where he can't operate. He is, what do you call this when to operate under the presumption that everything's cool would put him in a place of cognitive dissonance, right? So now we have more split voice poems, but after Lead Belly Writes Home, after this moment of insight, the split voices start leaning towards Lead Belly's side, meaning Lead Belly is in the right column. So we get one more poem. You got one more time where Lead Belly's in the left column after this poem, and then the rest of it is like Lead Belly's in the right, Lead Belly's in the right, which means his voice is more dominant. So that, I feel, because the change, it puts the change, it puts the peripatesis I'm sorry, the peripeteia, I mixed those two words together, right near the end of the book. And even though that peripeteia isn't really shown, unless you guys have other ways to interpret these poems, I don't think that moment of reversal is shown in one poem. I think it's just evident in the next section, you know, where he's like, now I'm living in Harlem with Martha. It's like, oh, okay, it's evident that there was a change, but we don't really see the reversal happen. So yes, that is something that I find interesting about the ordering, but I would love to hear more from you guys about where you think the moment of insight actually is and where you think the peripeteia actually is, if you believe it's there. Yeah, I think that's good. That's good for now. Oh, also the inciting incident, if that's something you want to circle back to and talk about, or other places where you see in the broader structure from the helicopter view, the ordering of the poems, like other things that you are uncovering about the way it's ordered, more than just the chiasmus at the beginning and end of the structure, but maybe there's more that you see, please let me know. I'm going to stop this video now because it's getting long.